I figured that if one of these games gets close, I'm going to give the Mavs the edge based on their star power. But time and time again in this series, the Celtics showed that it was their stars, and it wasn't necessarily in crunch time. If you go back to game 3, that third quarter by Boston, in which Tatum and Brown led the way, was super impressive. Their game 5 play was impressive. It just seemed like, both of those guys were able to kind of exercise their demons. When the narrative around the Celtics is, especially during this playoff run, that, well, they didn't play anybody. It's like you said, when you really look into this team and dissect what they're able to do offensively, 1 through 5, being able to space the floor, make solid decisions, defensive end, putting on a clinic, they're impressive, man. It didn't matter the run that they made. It was still going to be this result in them holding up the Larry O'Brien trophy.
No doubt. And listen, so let me say this. Did they have an easier road than others have had? There is absolutely no doubt. They had Miami without Butler. They had Cleveland, who didn't have Mitchell half the series. And then they had Indiana, who lost Halliburton halfway through the series. But all you can do is beat who's put in front of you. And here's my point, okay? When you earn the number 1 seed and win 64 regular season games, your road's supposed to be easier. Like, you kind of earned the easier road. You earned some of that in the regular season. We want the regular season to matter. Well, the regular season matters. Here's the other point that I'll make. And listen, I'll concede in certain arguments to people the fact that the teams that pose the toughest matchups for them, they never had to face. Yeah. So I felt like in the East, it was the Knicks and Philadelphia posed tough matchups for them. And in the West, I thought it was Denver and Minnesota. And they avoided all 4 of those teams. But that's part of being the number 1 seed. But here's the other more macro point to that, Casey. You can't have it both ways. You can't turn around and say, well, the league has more talent now than it's ever had. The league is tougher and deeper, which I do believe. I think it's empirically true. But you can't make that case and then tell me Boston had it easy. You still had to win 16 games and 4 playoff series against the teams that were still upright and still there and playing. Yeah. And by the same token, you had people arguing after the Western Conference Finals that this is one of the best offensive backcourts in history. Well, you know what? Boston made them look pretty bad. And I know people want to scream and yell about Kyrie Irving, not being able to play in Boston. The reality is, I don't think it was that. I think it was Kyrie Irving really struggled with Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Jason Tatum guarding him.
They shut him down.
That's what it was. Yeah. It was the matchup that stifled Kyrie, not the crowd. Yeah. So that's it. Here's the Tatum and Brown thing that I also want to get to, because I think, CP, this is really, really important. Okay. Those 2 guys have developed an innate sense to know when it's the other's time. And what's happened is, not only does the one stay out of the way when it's the other's time, when the other feels it and has it going, that one feeds him and sets him up and uses, because both of them have a ton of gravity offensively. Both of them are going to attract attention when the ball's in their hands. They use their gravity to create space for the other one, and they do it really, really well. So that's to me, that whole chemistry with that team and is based upon who Tatum and Brown are to each other. If Tatum and Brown, with this entire alpha dog war that the media and the fans create around them, can rise above it, everything else just falls into place. So that works well. One other point on Luka that I want to make, and I think we talk about adjustments that Luka has to make to his game at the age of 23 to be able to get to the next level. All right, obviously we know conditioning matters, and yes, he was beat up. He had a bad knee on one leg, a bad ankle on the other, and he had a thoracic contusion, and his torso was wrapped for the last 4 games of that series. All those things are true, but the conditioning still wasn't good. And you can make the case, what comes first, the chicken or the egg when it comes to conditioning? Is he hurt more because he's not in the right shape? Or did he fall out of shape because he got hurt? Those are fair questions. But get in better condition and those questions get answered. The other thing is this. He's got to stop playing defense like he plays offense. And here's what I mean. Offensively, when you have all that talent, you can attack and make a play. You can see an opening, or you can, more than that, what Luka does is creates an opening. You can go and be aggressive at making plays. You can't play defense that exact same way. When you play defense that way, you foul out of crucial games down 3 with 4 minutes left. Because sometimes defense, a lot of times defense, is about defending a 24-second possession. You have to be opportunistic on defense to block shots or get steals. Teams have to kind of come to you on that. You sometimes just have to defend the possession and get the rebound. Luka's constantly trying to make a play on defense. Bad gamble, stuff like that. He has to be, for such a high IQ player, he makes a whole lot of low IQ defensive plays.
I totally agree with you on that. And, this NBA Finals, there was so much narratives, especially about the Celtics and Tatum and Brown. And last year, coming off of that embarrassing conference finals loss to the Heat, there were so many that wanted to break these two guys up. Break them up, break them up. They don't fit, break them up. And I remember I was on the outside looking in like, yes, they have not been fortunate. They're always a bridesmaid in these situations. But when I'm looking at this team and I see a team that has two wings in their prime, two-way players in their prime that have constantly gotten their team to the Eastern Conference Finals. For Brown, this was his sixth this year. For Tatum, it was his fifth. These guys have a north of 60% winning percentage. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, they've accomplished a whole lot. And so Stevens went out there and got them the team that can help them get over the hump. But I never bought the narrative that you got to break these guys up. To me, it was they've got to work on getting the proper pieces around them that can help them move this thing forward. Who's the right point guard that's going to help these guys? How do they improve defensively? Stevens went out there, he got everything right, and these two guys learned, I think, from their previous mistakes. Brown, 8 of 23 in that Heat series. In Game 7, he was brutal. Everyone's saying the left hand. He comes out, he's a two-way force and wins the MVP. Tatum, he's soft. He's not attacking enough. Game 7, he's going right through them like Swiss cheese, straight to the basket, aggressive, gets a 30-point, 11-assist game. Phenomenal by those two guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, let's talk about Brown for a minute because he went back. First, they had a decision. Pretty much it was either make Jaylen Brown the highest paid player in the NBA or trade him. Those were your only two choices last year in the offseason. And the Celtics, to their credit, and I credit their ownership, Whit Grasbeck, Steve Pagliuca, these guys, they didn't waver. We're making him the highest paid player. And Casey, I was with UCP. I felt as though that they weren't the problem. And this is where I was stupid. I thought the coach was the problem, and he was excellent. He did a super job. Now, granted, they gave him the kind of staff he didn't have the year before. He was really flying blind the year before. This year, and to my understanding, he did a super job where he was really lauded by the people around him. Is he understood how green he was and how much he had to learn. And Charles Lee, Sam Cassell, Jeff Van Gundy, they had these people around him who really helped him. But listen, you don't get help unless you're willing to receive help. And Mazzulla wanted the help. He encouraged it. Okay. He went after it. And I give him all the credit in the world for doing that. Brown got paid, and then he went and busted his ass.
He did.
To be able to get better at his game, to improve the left hand, to improve the shooting. How about his body, CP? Right, dude. Right. Lee was in the gym all summer.
Yeah.
I mean, his upper body has developed tremendously. He looks great. So, like, all those things absolutely matter within the framework of this organization. So those two guys lead the way. Here's one thing to note about Brad Stevens, which I think is important. The Porzingis deal took stones, man. It really did, CC. It took stones.
Marcus Smart.
Hard to trade Marcus Smart off that team. Not easy. And he went ahead and brought in Porzingis, who's injured all the time, but he understood the upside of the impact Porzingis could have there. The Holiday deal, I know we give Stevens a lot of credit for him, but listen, sometimes luck plays a role. Also, this one fell in his lap. He didn't know he was getting Drew Holiday when he traded Marcus Smart.
Right.
All right. He didn't, this whole Lillard-Milwaukee thing came out of nowhere. Holiday ends up in Portland, and Brad Stevens, to his credit, had more assets than anybody else that he was willing to pony up to bring Drew Holiday in. And the thing was where it really bailed him out that no one talks about. Keep in mind, a week before, maybe 3 or 4 days before they traded for Porzingis, they had a deal that they thought was done to have Malcolm Brogdon go to the Clippers in a 3-way deal with the Wizards, and the Clippers never actually agreed to it. There was some kind of miscommunication there. And they had to bring Brogdon back. Brogdon, who's a guy that really doesn't keep his opinions to himself all that often in a locker room and has a lot to say, especially when he's unhappy, was really unhappy.
He was tight.
And they were going to have to figure out how to mend fences with him when they brought him back. So when the Holiday deal came, it was not only, boy, we get an upgrade from Marcus Smart in that spot, but we get to take an unhappy guy and realize a ton of value for him and send him to another team.
Yeah.
It really just kind of fell together for them. And listen, Stevens, if you don't have the assets and you're not prepared, and you don't, by the way, bring in 2 first-round picks with Porzingis for Marcus Smart, I mean, one of the great trades of the last decade. If you don't do that, you're not in position to be able to go get Drew Holiday, so Stevens deserves credit there. But definitely there was a little bit of luck of the Irish coming in for the Celtics last offseason here.
And it's part of the game, right? It's part of the business. You have to have a little bit of luck, whether it's drafting, team composition, how you play out in series. The luck plays a part in it. And for Stevens, just like you said, it came in the nick of time. He was able to navigate the scandal with Udoka, puts in Missoula with, a couple days left before training camp. Could have went out there and got a big-name coach, stuck to his guns. By the end of last year, everybody wants Missoula out of there. Again, sticks to their guns, and he turns out to be a hero. And turning Marcus Smart, a fan favorite, another guy who established the culture there, into Porzingis, which is risky, then gets that first-round pick on top of that, as you said, and they're able to turn that into Drew Holiday or package some of that into Drew Holiday. That was tremendous. But what's even better for the Celtics, I think, is that as we look into the offseason, they're probably the best positioned in terms of their roster and repeating because they have all those guys under contract. White is going to be due for an extension, even though he has 1 year left. They gave Drew Holiday his money. Tatum's going to be next for that crazy max deal, which he'll deserve. But the Celtics, I mean, aside from some back end of the rotation free agents, they're in great position right now.
Fantastic. One more quick thought on the Smart deal. And I heard Brian Scalabrine make this point this week on NBA radio, and I think he's spot on about this. The Smart was the big brother to Tatum and Brown. He was the leader there. Sending Smart out allowed Tatum and Brown, they're the two longest tenured Celtics now. And Al Horford was there, left, and came back, but they're the two longer tenured Celtics. And Al Horford was never the leader there. It allowed Tatum and Brown to assume this role of leadership. It created a void that the two of them stepped into together. And the thing is, because their relationship is what it was, and it wasn't always like this, but because they have such tremendous trust and respect for one another, the two of them walk into a leadership role and they do it together. And they both have the same leadership style. They respect one another's style. They're both a little more understated in how they lead. Brown a little more vocal, Tatum a little bit more by example, but they support one another. I don't know that can happen with Smart still there. So that, to me, that's a really, really important factor. I credit Scal bringing that up this week. Regarding them in the offseason, listen, I don't know that Horford's back. Horford may end up retiring. He may not. But I think his impact as the years go on is gonna really diminish here. So I don't think he's a guy you can count on. They turned Sam Hauser into an NBA rotation player. Yeah. This dude's good.
I was impressed.
And he really, and it's beyond the shooting. I'm going to credit Joe Mazzulla for something he did at the end of the Indiana series. What he did is, listen, they were up 3-0, and Hauser had been miserable in that series. Couldn't throw it in the ocean. Yeah. Joe Mazzulla put him out there for 14 minutes in that game, and he was 1 of 6 from the field. But he made a couple of hustle plays. He got switched onto the ball, held up defensively, got a few rebounds. He scrapped and fought and kind of did something outside shooting. And the message Mazzulla sent him is that we have to play you. You're our guy. We're putting you on the floor regardless of whether you make shots or not. So we need more out of you. And Hauser rose that level of play to give them more off-the-ball stuff that he was not giving them all year. And then the finals come, and he's feeling confident because he knows they don't just trust in him as a specialist. They trust in him as a player. And all of a sudden the shots start falling again. And so he's a guy you can count on going forward. Pritchard is who he is. He's a one-way player. He's an offensive player, not a defensive player. The Celtics are going to benefit in this offseason. And you're right. Tatum's going to get a full extension. White's going to get a full extension. They're all in on those 5 guys, as they should be.
Yeah.
They'll benefit from something this offseason, which is the fact that they may get a vet or two on that bench that can help them, because guys are going to say, hey, you know what? This is an opportunity to go win a ring in Boston in what feels and seems like a really good environment to be a really good team, positive, up and down the line. The Celtics may recruit a guy or two that would take less to go there because they're going to be very restricted in what they can do to add to this roster. They're going to need that type of generosity from a veteran, but winning a title, especially like this, puts you in a position to be able to do that.